My name is Victoria, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The morning in the seaside town of Carmel by the Sea was filled with sunshine, the sky as blue as a blessing for my wedding to Jason, the man I had loved for 7 years. The small St. Andrew's church covered in white orchids and soft music welcomed each guest in a solemn atmosphere. I stood in a small room behind the sanctuary, nervously adjusting my veil in front of a large mirror. Natalie, my best friend from college, was carefully smoothing out the last wrinkles on my wedding dress. "You look like a real princess," Natalie smiled, her eyes sparkling with joy. I pressed my lips together in a smile, my heart pounding with excitement and nerves. 7 years of love, 7 years of waiting, and finally, this moment had come. I closed my eyes, inhaled the sweet scent of flowers deeply, trying to memorize every second. Suddenly, a commotion rose from the front of the church, shattering the dreamlike atmosphere. Natalie and I exchanged a look before she quickly ran out to see what was happening. Just seconds later she came back, her face pale. "Victoria," Natalie whispered, her voice tight with tension. "It's her." Before I could ask, the door burst open. Mrs. Helen, Jason's mother, stormed in, her face flushed with rage. In her hand was a crumpled handkerchief, clenched as if she could crush the world itself. "Mrs. Helen, what?" I stammered, but she didn't let me finish. "Thief!" she screamed, pointing directly at me in front of Natalie and my father, who was about to walk me down the aisle. "You stole my sapphire ring, the McAllister family heirloom." I froze. The room felt like it turned to ice in that instant. Murmurs began to ripple from outside as curious guests gathered around the wide-open door. I don't understand," I stuttered, my voice breaking from shock. "I've never even seen that ring." "Don't pretend," Helen hissed, her eyes blazing. "I left it in the dressing room this morning and now it's gone. You were the only one who went in there." I turned to my father. He gripped my shoulders tightly, his eyes full of worry and helplessness. Natalie whispered urgently to the wedding coordinator, trying to calm the buzzing crowd. At that moment, Jason appeared, his face tense, his eyes scanning from his mother to me. "Victoria," his voice was low, heavy like lead. "Is it true?" I felt like I was falling into an endless void. The man I loved, trusted more than myself, was questioning me. Right there, under everyone's judgmental gaze. "Jason," I whispered, tears burning down my cheeks. "I swear to you, I didn't do it. I never even touched that ring." But Jason's eyes were clouded with doubt. He said nothing, just stood there, fists clenched at his sides. Helen wouldn't back down, her shrill voice cutting through the room. "If you have any decency, return it now. Otherwise there will be no wedding." The air felt suffocating, ready to explode. Every eye was on me, the whispers pricking at my skin like invisible needles. Jason spoke slowly, his voice cold and merciless. "If you took it, Victoria, give it back. Otherwise, I can't go through with this." I clutched my chest as if to keep my heart from shattering. The dreams of a future together, the months spent planning this day, all crumbled in an instant. I looked straight into Jason's eyes, the eyes that once held all my love. "If you can't believe me today," I whispered, each word slicing through the heavy silence, "then we shouldn't get married." Without waiting for his reaction, I gripped my father's arm and turned away, leaving behind Jason's choked call, the shocked stares, and the searing pain tearing through my soul. Outside, the sun still blazed down, but inside me there was only a frozen void. I rushed out of the church, my father's hand gripping mine tightly as if to keep me from collapsing under the weight of all the staring eyes. Each step on the cold stone felt like a knife cutting into my heart. My pure white wedding dress swept the dusty road, dragging the shattered pieces of my dream behind it. Natalie ran beside me, panting. "Victoria, wait!" I called. "A car," she whispered, glancing nervously at the gathering crowd as if my ruined wedding was the town's latest spectacle. I couldn't hear anything anymore. Every whisper, every stare cut deeper into me like invisible blades. Jason didn't run after me. No explanations, no attempt to fight for me. At the moment I needed him most, he chose silence. The car Natalie called pulled up to the church steps. My father opened the door, his hand never leaving my shoulder. "Let's go, sweetheart," he said, his voice steady like the last standing pillar in a storm. I climbed into the car, my wedding dress tangling at my feet, my soul torn to shreds. Natalie got in beside me, glancing nervously out the window, as if half expecting Jason to appear. But he didn't. Only Helen's angry face and the crowd's curious stares remained. The car sped off through the bright California sunshine, but inside me everything was gray and cold. I leaned my head against the window, letting the tears stream down my burning cheeks. "Should we go to my place?" Natalie asked softly. I nodded weakly. I couldn't go back to my apartment. Every corner held memories of Jason. Every photo, every little decoration would scream betrayal at me. The car pulled up in front of Natalie's little hillside house, the same place we used to gather in our college days. My father got out first, opening the door for me like I was still his little girl going to a birthday party. I stepped into the house, feeling empty. Natalie wrapped me in a soft towel, then silently made tea while my father stepped outside to call my mother and deliver the devastating news. I curled up on the sofa, my crumpled wedding dress clinging to my cold body. Everything had happened so fast, so cruelly. An hour ago, I had been a bride about to walk down the aisle, hand in hand with the man I trusted most. Now, I was left with trembling hands and a shattered heart. Natalie sat down next to me, silently handing me a cup of hot tea. I clutched it like a lifeline, letting the warmth seep into my skin, reminding me I was still here, even if my world had collapsed. "I'm so sorry, Vic," she whispered, her eyes red. "I know you would never do something like that." I let out a dry laugh, echoing through the quiet room. "It doesn't matter anymore, does it?" I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. The one who needed to believe in me the most didn't. Outside the window the sunlight sparkled over the distant water, but to me everything was just a cold, empty void. I took a sip of tea, the bitter taste spreading across my tongue, a harsh reminder that some wounds couldn't be washed away by a single night of tears. The phone rang, making me jump. Natalie looked at the screen, then turned to me. "It's Jason," she said cautiously. I froze. Part of me wanted to grab the phone, scream at him, demand why he would believe a lie over me, but another part, the tired, wounded part, just wanted to let it go. "Don't answer," I said hoarsely, shaking my head. "I don't want to hear any excuses." Natalie silenced the phone and placed it face down on the table. The air in the room was heavy, like it was about to shatter. I sat there in my torn wedding dress, bathed in slanted beams of light coming through the window, and I knew that from this moment on, everything had changed. No more Jason. No more fairy tale dreams. We sat in the corner of a small seaside cafe, the warm dim light unable to soothe the storm raging inside me. Natalie sat across from me, squeezing my hand now and then as if to remind me I wasn't alone. My father stood by the door, his eyes sharp and watchful like an old warrior guarding the last piece of dignity left. I hadn't even taken a sip of tea when the door swung open. Jason stepped in, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. His gaze swept across the cafe and landed on me. "Victoria," he called softly, quickly making his way over to our table. I gripped my teacup tighter, feeling the cold seep into my bones. Jason pulled out a chair and sat down. There was only a small table between us, but it felt like an ocean. He swallowed hard, his eyes flickering between guilt and confusion. I just want to hear you say it one more time." I looked straight at him, my heart numb. "What exactly do you want to hear, Jason?" I asked, my voice no longer trembling like last night but cold and ruthlessly calm. "Just admit it," Jason whispered, bowing his head. "Just say you took the ring in a moment of weakness and I'll forgive you. We can put all of this behind us. We can still have our wedding." I let out a laugh, sharp enough to silence the entire cafe. "You want me to confess just so it'll be easier for you to forgive me?" I repeated, each word slicing through the suffocating air. Jason didn't answer, his hands clenched into tight fists on the table. I looked at him. The man who once meant everything to me, now small, weak, and heartbreakingly cowardly. "No," I said firmly, "I didn't do it, and I will not lower myself to confess just to soothe your weakness." Jason's eyes darkened. In an instant I saw anger flash through him. He shot up from his chair, leaned in close, his voice a low growl. "Who do you think you are? If it wasn't you, then who else could it have been? The words hit me like a slap, my blood boiled to my head. Without thinking, I swung my hand and slapped him across the face. The sound cracked through the heavy air. Jason stumbled back a step, his face flushing with shock and rage. Guests turned their heads, whispering. In a split second, things spun out of control. Jason lunged toward me, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. Before I could react, a sharp pain exploded on my left cheek. His hand had struck me, hard enough to make me stagger back, nearly falling off my chair. My father immediately rushed over, shoving Jason back, his voice a deep growl. "What do you think you're doing?" Jason struggled, but my father held him firmly, his eyes blazing with a fury like he was ready to tear the world apart to protect me. Natalie rushed behind me, steadying me as I clutched my burning cheek, dizziness washing over me. The cafe manager hurried over, loudly ordering Jason to leave. A few customers stood up, pointing and whispering, their faces filled with shock as if they had just witnessed a disaster unfold before their eyes. Jason shook off my father's hand, his face falling, but it was too late. No one wanted to hear any excuses anymore. I stood up, tasting salt at the corner of my lips. Under the soft yellow lights, I saw the burning redness on my cheek. Natalie gently grabbed my shoulder and whispered, "Let's go, Victoria." I nodded without hesitation. We walked out, my father staying close by, a strong shield between me and the curious stares. I didn't look back. I didn't need to know whether Jason was standing there looking regretful or cold, because from the moment his hand struck me, everything was over. Outside, the ocean winds whipped my silk scarf from my shoulders. I pulled it tighter, trying to hide the redness on my cheek. But I couldn't hide the deeper pain eating away inside me. Natalie gently took my arm. "Want me to call the police?" she asked. I looked at her, then at my father. Both were waiting, giving me the power to decide. I took a deep breath. "No," I said quietly, "not now. I just want to go home." My father nodded and flagged down a nearby taxi. As the car sped away, leaving the little cafe and the fresh scars behind, I made a promise to myself. This would not define my life. I sat silently in the living room at Natalie's house, the soft yellow lamp casting a blurry glow on the cream-colored walls. The cold compress Natalie had given me had long since lost its chill, but the throbbing pain on my cheek remained, a constant, unerasable reminder. Outside, the ocean winds howled louder, the crashing waves sounding like they were pounding against the raw wounds inside me. I pulled the thick blanket tighter around myself, my eyes dry but my heart completely worn out. I had cried all the way home. Cried until there was nothing left. Now only a heavy emptiness pressed against my chest. Natalie sat nearby, holding an open book she wasn't really reading, just staying close so I wouldn't feel alone during this endless night. I closed my eyes, letting the memories flood back. Jason, his accusing eyes, the slap, the betrayal. It all played on a loop like a broken film I couldn't shut off. A part of me still couldn't believe it had really happened. That my 7-year love story had ended so cruelly. It was 3 in the morning when I finally drifted off into a restless sleep full of shattered dreams. I dreamt of standing alone in a deserted church, wearing my torn wedding dress, calling out, but no one ever came back. When I woke up, the faint morning light was seeping through the curtains. My head felt heavy as lead, my body aching like after a brutal battle. I stepped out into the kitchen and saw Natalie preparing breakfast, her face still etched with worry. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice as fragile as glass. I tried to smile back, a pale, unfamiliar smile. I sat at the table, mindlessly spinning the glass of orange juice in my hands. My phone lay silently on the table. I knew I'd have to face it eventually. I picked it up and turned it on, and immediately the screen lit up with countless missed calls and messages. Jason's name was right at the top, cutting a fresh wound across my heart. I took a deep breath and opened the message. "Jason, I'm sorry. Please give me a chance to explain. I shouldn't have done that. I was wrong. Please, Victoria." Another message followed immediately. "Jason, I'll wait. As long as it takes. Just hear me out once." I clutched the phone, the old pain flaring up again. For a brief second, the soft-hearted part of me almost wanted to believe him, to go back to before everything broke apart. But reason pulled me back just in time. I remembered Jason's eyes when he doubted me, when he pushed me to confess to something I never did. And most of all, I remembered the slap, not just to my face but to everything we had built. "Are you okay?" Natalie asked, her eyes filled with worry. I set the phone down, as if it were something filthy I didn't want to touch again. "I'm okay," I said, my voice raspy but firm. "And I'm not going back." Natalie nodded gently, like a heavy weight had lifted off her chest. I knew this decision would mean lonely days, awkward questions from friends and family, endless whispers. But I also knew forgiving Jason wasn't salvation. It would only extend the pain and bury my dignity deeper. I picked up the phone, dialed Jason's number. After a few rings, he answered, his voice rushed. "Spell out. Yeah, Victoria, please, just let me meet you, explain." I cut him off, my voice calm, almost chilling. "There's no need, Jason." Jason, I interrupted, clearer this time, each word carving the space between us. "There will be no second chances. Not now, not ever." I hung up before he could say anything else. A wave of relief washed over me, though my hands were still trembling. I turned to Natalie. She smiled warmly, proudly. Yesterday I was the abandoned bride. But today, I am the woman who chose herself. 2 days later, just when I thought everything might finally settle down, another message from Jason appeared on my screen. "Victoria, please, give me a chance. There's something you need to know. Meet me at Beacon Cafe 10 a.m. tomorrow. If you don't come, I'll understand." I stared at the message, torn inside. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on, as if the past had never existed. But another part, the part still craving the truth, wouldn't let me ignore it. The next morning, with the early sunlight thin as silk, I walked into Beacon Cafe with a heavy heart. Natalie had insisted on coming with me, but I refused. This conversation, I needed to end it myself. Jason was already there, looking noticeably thinner, his faded blue shirt wrinkled. When he saw me, he immediately stood up, looking nervous. I didn't greet him. I just coldly pulled out a chair and sat down. "Say what you need to say," I said, my voice dry. Jason swallowed, his eyes darting away before he finally took a deep breath. "Victoria, the ring? My mother found it." I frowned. "Found it?" Jason nodded, his voice hoarse. "She accidentally left it in her nightstand drawer. She didn't even remember putting it there." A chill ran down my spine. "So?" I clenched my hands to stop them from shaking. "All the accusations that day were baseless?" Jason lowered his head. I had a huge fight with my mom after finding out. I cut ties with them. I moved out." I laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Moved out? Cut ties? After everything, you think that's enough?" Jason looked up, his eyes pleading. "I know saying sorry isn't enough. I just want you to know you were innocent. I was a fool for not believing you." I looked at him, the man who once was my whole world, now just a stranger, full of regret. "Jason," I said, my voice calm as a still lake, "you didn't just not believe me, you chose to side with the person who humiliated me. You let doubt destroy everything we had." He reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled it back, feeling the coldness spread through me. "I regret it," Jason whispered, his voice shaking. "I lost you, didn't I?" I looked him straight in the eyes without flinching. "You did." No tears, no more begging, only the cold and inevitable end of a relationship that had rotted from its very roots. Jason bowed his head, his hands clenched tightly together as if desperately searching for a salvation that would never come again. I stood up, as light as an early autumn breeze. "Wish you happiness," I said, without bitterness, just letting go. As I turned and walked out of the cafe, the morning sunlight poured onto the steps, golden and warm. For the first time after all those dark days, I lifted my head high, filling my lungs with fresh air, feeling my heart beat steady once more. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment, carrying a strange mix of pain and relief. No more constant phone calls, no more haunting pleas. Just me in the familiar room, where every corner was filled with memories of Jason. I stood in the middle of the living room, sunlight slanting through the big windows, casting a glow over the sofa where we used to laugh together. My fingers brushed the framed photos on the wall, each item seeming to whisper, Why are you still holding on to the past? I walked over to the desk, where the wedding calendar, honeymoon plans, and guest list still sat untouched. A sharp ache stabbed through me as I read the neatly written words, Victoria and Jason's big day. I closed the planner, tore it into tiny pieces, and let the scraps of paper fall like snowflakes across the living room. That night, I sat in front of my computer, the cold blue glow reflecting off my still bluest left cheek. I opened my email and began typing a request for an extended leave of absence. My fingers moved across the keys, firm and without hesitation. Dear HR Director, I am requesting a 6-month leave of absence to recover my mental and physical health. I hope the company will understand, and I am committed to a thorough handover of my responsibilities. Sincerely, Victoria Hart. I hit send. A complete, pure silence wrapped around me afterward. There was nothing tying me to my old life anymore. I sat there letting myself feel the emptiness. Then, suddenly, an image flashed in my mind, a pristine beach, emerald waters, palm trees swaying gently in the breeze. Wasn't sure where the memory came from, maybe a postcard someone had once sent me. Seychelles. The name sounded like a soft invitation from another world. I opened my browser and searched for images of Seychelles. Each photo lit a quiet fire inside me. Endless blue skies, stretches of white sand, winding paths through untouched forests. Without overthinking it, I booked a flight. One way. No return date. The next morning, after my leave request was approved, I started packing. I didn't need much. Just a few comfortable clothes, a blank journal, and an old camera I had never really gotten the chance to use properly. Natalie came over to help me pack. When she saw the e-ticket on the kitchen counter, her eyes widened. Are you sure about this, Victoria? I nodded, a real smile, the first in weeks, appearing on my lips. I've never been more sure. Natalie hugged me tightly, squeezing a little harder, as if trying to pass her strength into me. I'm proud of you, she whispered. The night before my flight, I stood alone on the balcony, a cup of warm mint tea in hand. The city lights twinkled below, life moving on as always, while I was preparing to step into a brand new chapter. Part of me was afraid, leaving everything familiar behind, going alone to a foreign land. But the bigger part, the stronger part, craved to live true to myself, too fiercely to resist. The next morning, at the airport, I stood waiting with my small suitcase. No Jason, no shattered dreams, only me and a future yet to be written. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window, watching the small city fade into a misty blur. I closed my eyes and whispered a promise to myself. From today onward, I would no longer live to meet anyone's expectations. I would no longer force myself to be the perfect girl in anyone else's eyes. The plane touched down at Seychelles International Airport under the brilliant light of a late afternoon sun. As I stepped out of the terminal, warm ocean breezes caressed my face, carrying the scent of salt and tropical flowers. Everything felt foreign, free, and that was exactly why I felt alive. I rented a small bungalow nestled among the palms on Mahe Island, far from the crowded tourist areas. Every morning I woke to the rhythm of waves and birdsong in the dense trees, as if nature itself was trying to gently heal the aching wounds in my heart. In those first few days, I wandered endlessly along stretches of white sand, letting my bare feet sink into the velvet soft beach. I carried the old camera, a birthday gift from my mother, and began capturing everything that caught my eye. Tiny crabs darting into the sand, emerald waves crashing against the rocks, sunsets setting the sky ablaze. One afternoon, as I sat on the beach trying to capture the moment the sun sank into the sea, I met Luke. He was focused on adjusting the lens of a professional camera, trying to catch the tiniest movement of the waves. Seeing me struggling with my old camera, Luke smiled warmly and walked over. Your focus is a little off, he said, with a thick American accent, his eyes sparkling with friendliness. I blushed, a bit embarrassed by his blunt honesty, but I couldn't help laughing at the sincerity in his gaze. Luke sat down next to me, patiently showing me how to adjust the lens, how to catch the light naturally. From that chance meeting, we grew close. Luke, about 5 years older than me, was a freelance photographer who spent most of his life traveling the world, capturing vibrant memories through his photos. He told me stories about trekking across Patagonia, sleeping in tents in the Sahara Desert, and exploring remote parts of South Asia. Listening to him, I saw a world far bigger than my own pain, where personal heartbreak seemed so small compared to the grandeur of nature. With Luke, I learned to see the world through a new lens, not one of hurt, but one focused on simple, honest details. We spent hours on the beach, in colorful local markets, or wandering through tiny villages few tourists ever found. Luke patiently taught me how to catch a fleeting moment, how to listen to the silent stories hidden in each smile, each glance. One night, while we sat on a boat deck staring up at the stars, half-finished coconut drinks beside us, Luke turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "Victoria," he said, "have you ever thought about making photography something bigger? A real journey, not just a hobby?" I laughed, shaking my head. I never thought I was good enough for something big. Luke smiled, his blue eyes steady with certainty. "You have an eye for it. Something you can't teach. Technique can be learned. But feeling? That's a gift." Those words planted a small, steady flame inside me. A week later, while we were editing photos at a small seaside cafe, Luke suddenly made a suggestion. "I have a friend running a dive center in southern Thailand. He's looking for someone to handle communications and capture activities through photos. Would you want to give it a try?" I froze. The idea of moving to a new country, taking on an entirely new job, working in an unpredictable environment, it all sounded like a crazy adventure the old Victoria would have never even dared to imagine. But now, after everything I had been through, I knew I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I looked at Luke, his patient eyes offering not pressure but a door. I pressed my lips together, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'll need a night to think about it," I whispered. Luke simply nodded, smiling. "Whatever you choose, I believe you'll find your own path." That night I sat alone on the bungalow's balcony, under a sky scattered with diamond-like stars. The ocean breeze whispered through the palm trees, soft and full of promise. And I knew a new chapter was waiting ahead. A month later I landed at Phuket Airport under the bright blue skies of southern Thailand. The unfamiliar scent of tropical air, the lively chatter, and the colorful stalls made me feel like I had stepped into an entirely new world. Mark, the friend Luke had mentioned, greeted me right at the exit. He was an American in his 40s, tanned and rugged, always smiling warmly. "Welcome to the land where shoes are optional," Mark joked, as he helped lift my suitcase onto an old pickup truck. I laughed, the first natural laugh in weeks, one that needed no effort at all. We drove to the dive center, a small building by Katanoi Beach, hidden among lush coconut trees. The sea gently lapped the golden sand just a few steps away. My room was simple: a bamboo bed, a small desk by the window, and a ceiling fan humming overhead. But when I flung the window open and let the ocean breeze rush in, I knew I didn't need anything more. My work began the very next day. In the mornings I managed dive registrations, checked emails, and replied to customer messages. In the afternoons I followed the dive groups out to sea, carrying my camera to capture magical moments beneath the ocean's surface. At first I was clumsy. The waves were stronger than I expected, and the sun here was so fierce that just one missed application of sunscreen left me red as a lobster. But Mark and the dive center team were patient, encouraging me every step of the way. I got used to waking up with the sunrise, walking barefoot across the wet sand to the sea, breathing in the salty air. I grew familiar with mixing English and a few broken Thai words learned from local colleagues. And, more than anything, I got used to the feeling of truly living, without the shadow of the past weighing me down. The camera became my closest companion. I captured everything: divers waving beneath the deep blue water, colorful schools of fish gliding over coral reefs, the bright faces of tourists touching the ocean floor for the first time. I started posting the photos on the dive center's website and social media accounts. Tour bookings soared, and Mark praised me at every team meeting. "Victoria, you're breathing life into this place," he once said, his eyes full of trust. Day by day, week by week, I felt like an essential part of this place. No one cared who I used to be or what I had gone through. They only saw who I was now, a girl trying her best every day to start anew. One night, after finishing a night dive shoot, I sat alone on the dive center steps, watching the moonlight dance across the calm sea. I opened my phone and reread emails from my old company, reminding me about the deadline to return after my leave. I quietly read them all, then turned off my phone and left it resting silently on my lap. I knew I had a choice to make. And surprisingly, I had no hesitation anymore. I didn't want to go back. No more cold office rooms, no more dull meetings, no more pitying looks I would have to endure, no more familiar streets reminding me of broken dreams. Here I had found a different part of myself, where every day began with the sound of waves and ended with a blazing sunset at the horizon. I stood up, wet sand clinging to my feet, and looked up at the star-filled sky. Tomorrow, I would write my official resignation email. The next morning, before the sun had fully pierced the light sea mist, I sat at the small wooden desk in my room, fingers poised above the keyboard. The old company's email still glowed on the screen, a silent reminder. I typed, slow but firm. Dear Management, I am officially notifying you that I will not be returning to work after my leave. Thank you for the previous opportunities. I have now found a new direction for my life. Wishing the company continued success. Sincerely, Victoria Hart. No hesitation, no regrets. I hit send and quietly closed that chapter. Outside, the ocean waves kept rolling onto the shore, steady and calm. Just like my heart, rediscovering its natural rhythm. From that day on, I began truly building a new life on this faraway land. I immediately signed up for a basic Thai course at a small community center about a 10-minute walk from the dive center. The first few classes were filled with laughter as I stumbled through pronunciations of Khop Khun Ka, thank you, and Sawazdee hello. Our teacher, a kind man named Chai, patiently corrected every small mistake, encouraging me step by step. At first, Thai sounded like a maze of strange tones. But little by little, I began to hear its soft rhythm, to see the warmth in the way the locals smiled and spoke. During the day, I continued my work at the dive center, checking tour schedules, assisting guests, and of course, taking photos. At night, I buried myself in books, practicing simple sentences so I could speak directly to the local people in their own language. Photography, once a small hobby, grew into a deep passion. I didn't just capture underwater moments anymore. I sought out fishing villages, bustling night markets, quiet alleys where children laughed under dim lights. Every photo felt like more than just a beautiful image. It was a slice of life, raw, vibrant, and real. Mark, who had seen potential in me from the beginning, encouraged me to organize a small exhibition at the dive center. At first, the idea terrified me. But with his constant encouragement and the team's, I found the courage to do it. The night of the exhibition, my photos were printed large and hung along the dive center hallway. Tourists, locals, even seasoned divers all stopped for long moments before each frame. An Australian tourist looked at me with a bright smile. "You've really captured the soul of this place," he said. Those words made my throat tighten. No glamorous titles needed. No shiny certificates. Just that simple, heartfelt compliment was enough to let me know I was on the right path. Gradually, I realized true peace didn't come from running away from old memories. It came from facing them, overcoming them, and rebuilding myself from the smallest things. Here, I lived slower, deeper. I learned to smile at strangers at the market, to be patient while diving all morning for just one perfect shot, to feel grateful for each sunrise, each sunset I witnessed. One night, sitting by the beach under the faint moonlight, I realized I no longer hurt when I thought about the past. Jason, Paris, the old days, they were just finished chapters, quietly resting on the shelf. I had moved far beyond what once broke me. And more importantly, I had found something I never dared believe I deserved: pure, steady peace from within. One dry seasoned afternoon, as the sunset painted the Katanoi sky purple, I sat on the wooden steps outside the dive center, my camera resting lightly on my lap. The breeze carried the salty scent of the sea, whispering greetings from the land that had embraced me at my most lost. I looked out at the horizon, the golden water glowing under the last light. In that moment, I realized I no longer thought of Jason with anger. The painful memories of the ruined wedding, the humiliation, the heartbreak. They were scars now. Sometimes aching, but no longer bleeding. I didn't deny what had happened. I had fallen. I despaired. But if not for that brutal blow, I might never have had the courage to let go of a life that no longer fit. If Jason hadn't turned away from me that day, I might still be clinging to a half-lived life, losing myself in hollow expectation. That pain, in the end, was the push that forced me out of the old cage, made me confront myself, asking, who am I really? How do I truly want to live? Now sitting under the vast Thai sky, I could finally answer. I am Victoria, a girl who once shattered, but who was strong enough to rebuild her life from the broken pieces. Life here wasn't always easy. There were days when big waves canceled all dives, weeks when business slowed and the center struggled. But every challenge made me tougher and deepened my love for the life I had built. I learned that happiness wasn't in grand things, it hid in small moments. A cold coconut water after a long dive. Laughter ringing out over the boat when spotting a pod of dolphins. The grateful look from a tourist receiving their best photo from the trip. I learned to be thankful for each day I woke up, breathing in the fresh air, doing the work I loved, living truly as myself, without performing for anyone. One day, while teaching a local girl how to hold a camera, I heard my phone chime. This message from Natalie, along with a photo she sent. She was standing in front of her house back in Carmel by the sea, holding a handwritten sign, "We miss you, Vic." I laughed, tears rolling down my cheeks. Not from sadness, but from feeling unconditionally loved, no matter where I was or what life I chose. I texted back, "I miss you too. But I'm happy, truly." That night, I added one more line to my travel journal. Thank you to the things that broke. Thank you to the dead-end roads. Because it was there at the end that I found the path back to myself. As I closed the journal, I knew the journey ahead would still be long. There would still be storms, moments of doubt. But now, I had enough faith to keep walking, without trembling, without questioning. I lifted my head to the starry night sky. Once again, my heart overflowed with a sense of freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from running away, but the freedom to face life head-on. To love it, with all its scars and imperfect beauty. Victoria's story proves that sometimes the losses we think will break us are actually the turning points that lead us back to ourselves. From a betrayed bride to a woman who built a new life in a distant land, she healed through perseverance and self-belief. She didn't just survive, she rediscovered passion, peace, and the pure joy of living. She turned heartbreak into strength and failure into a second chance at life. What do you think about Victoria's inspiring journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family life and personal growth.